We are an Or Lagoyim. So number one, just understanding that you walking around, smiling at people with a kippah on your head, saying hi to somebody, if they happen to be Jew, you have no idea how that's going to affect the rest of their life. You don't know how it's going to affect when all of a sudden they pick up the paper the next day and they read something about Israel. And you said to them, hey, nice to meet you. Where are you from at the Freshman Fest? And they say, oh, I'm from here. And they ask you, where are you from? And they're like, hey, I'm Yechiel. I was in Israel last year. And you smiled at them. And that's the only part of the conversation. And you said, I'm Yechiel. I was in Israel last year. And the next day they pick up the paper and they see Israel's done horrible things. And then they remember, 1 second, Yechiel, he was so nice to me yesterday. He smiled and he was there for the year. There must be something wrong with this, right? That on a very base level, just being an Or Lagoyim and walking around as a proud Jew can do some tremendous things.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Be'in podcast. I'm standing here in Yerushalayim just after my amazing hour-long conversation with Rabbi Adi Isaacs. This hour was focused on secular college after Israel. We talked about so many different avenues related to the topic of what happens after Yeshiva and Seminary, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you guys enjoyed as well. Rabbi Isaacs is somebody that works with hundreds of students that are in their year in Israel to help them get ready for what happens after Yeshiva and Seminary. In addition to that, he is pioneering a college program for students that want to spend their college experience in Yerushalayim. You'll hear a lot more about that in this week's episode. Lastly, before we get to the episode, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this week, and that is PIJ, Pesach in Jerusalem. It is an amazing Pesach program that is going to be in the heart of Yerushalayim, in the French Villa area at the Dan Jerusalem Hotel. There are so many amazing speakers that also work in the Yeshiva and Seminary space. Rabbi Shalom Rosner, for example, Rabbi Pessin, Rabbi Moshe Benovitz, and so much more. I'll put the flyer somewhere on screen and also the details in the show notes below. Without further ado, it's time to get into my episode with Rabbi Adi Isaacs.
Welcome to the Israel Gap Year Be'in podcast. I'm your host, Avi Proctor, and in each episode we get Be'in in depth into the remarkable lives of individuals in Israel who dedicate themselves to inspiring the next generation of Klal Yisrael. Welcome, Rabbi Isaacs, to the Be'in podcast, or I should honestly say thank you for having me, because obviously for those that are watching and listening right now, they could tell that I'm not in the typical studio that I do in Rabbi Shemesh, but nonetheless, the podcast is still the same, and there's a lot that we have to speak about today. But before we get into the topic today, which is obviously related to post-Yeshiva and Seminary, a lot of the things that you do personally, which is dealing with students in the secular college space after in Israel, give me a little bit of a background on yourself, give the viewers a little bit of a background. How did you get into the space working with Nitzavim and all the students here in Eretz Yisrael? And then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Avi. Really, really appreciate it. Sorry that you had to schlep to Shari Chesed. Hope the accommodations are good. Nice to see you here. So thank you very much. It's a schus to be on this podcast with you and to be able to share a little bit of the story and a little bit about myself. I'll tell you, I'm from Los Angeles. Grew up, went to ULA, then afterwards went to Karen B'Yavna. Then went to YU. After finishing YU, thought that the plan was to move back to LA, like every LA parent wants you to move back to LA. I have a lot of mishpacha there. Thought I was going to be a dentist, and then came to Israel for a year. My wife said, let's go to Israel for 1 year. Really, really, really loved doing things for Israel and the Jewish people. In my last year in YU, Steve Berg got me very involved in NCSY and got involved, ran Jolt, came to Israel, was in Yeshiva, in Rabbi Berkowitz's Yeshiva in Sanhedrin Merchaved, and there got very involved in Birthright. My wife and I led probably about 30 Birthright buses for the first year that we were here, which meant that a group of college-age kids would come to Israel. They'd see Israel for the first time, and there wasn't a Jewish rabbinical figure on the program. And so my wife and I worked with somebody named Daniel Barron, an amazing lawyer, started this program that we went and we joined them for all of Shabbos. And seeing these students that came to Israel for one time and leaving just after one Shabbos, interacting with them and how they were so connected, I think that really changed our life, and realized that the impact that any person can have on somebody that has never been to Israel before and that has never seen what Shabbos is like or what Judaism is like, if you just interact with them for a very short amount of time, really can change their lives forever. And through that, decided that wanted to stay in Israel and start a study abroad program with Hebrew University. We're partnered with Rothberg, and the idea was very simple, is there are hundreds of thousands of students in North America per year that study abroad somewhere in the world, meaning they're at every college campus, whether it's Penn, Harvard, UCLA, Rutgers, and you could sign up and do a semester abroad wherever you want. And in Israel, Hebrew University, top 80 university worldwide, they have partnerships with all different universities in America and around the world. So I said, let's try to get more kids to choose Israel to study abroad. And the idea was not just for them to come here, but to have a real immersive Israel experience, to learn about the army, to learn about the kibbutz life, to learn about high tech, and obviously to learn about Jewish holidays, to learn Shabbases. So it started off from an idea. I was young and passionate, and I would go to about 30 college campuses per year, go to from all the regular ones, from BU to Harvard to Northeastern to Muhlenberg before Muhlenberg became big, to UCLA, to Michigan, to Binghamton, to all of these different places, trying to speak to students that have never had a Jewish experience before. I used to start by going to the Hillels, the Chabads, the Israel organizations like AIPAC and SSI and all of those things. And after the first couple of years, it was very nice. We recruited a lot of people through the Jewish organizations, but realized that actually the majority of Jews on college campuses are actually not even involved in any of the Jewish organizations, which meant that we had to start recruiting in the fraternities and the sororities, and meaning the non-Jewish infrastructures. And so I would go meet a lot of these Jewish students and basically convince them that instead of going to Budapest or Italy for 5 months, they could always go on vacation. But what is something that will be unique and they'll never have the opportunity again is to go 5 months to come to Israel, call it home forever, learn how to speak Hebrew. And then you could also travel to Cyprus and Budapest from here. And I would get them to come to Israel, to Hebrew U, and then later on partnered with Tel Aviv University. So through these 10 years of experiences on speaking at about 30 campuses a year and meeting all different types of Jews and working with all different types of Jewish and Israel organizations, it's been extremely, extremely meaningful getting so many people to come to Israel. Their lives changed, their parents' lives changed. It keeps on going out like a ripple effect. Just this week, I'm invited to somebody that came on our program from York University that she now lives in Israel. She became religious. 3 of her siblings came to Israel, became religious also, and I'm invited to her siblings' chasana this coming week, because every person that you make an effect on will not just change their lives, but will change many other people's lives.
I love that. And by the way, I never knew that background, kind of to like the things that you do. I want to touch on, you said before that way back when you're at that stage of your life, figuring out, okay, what's next? What are you going to do? You're like, I figured like to make my parents happy, I'll move back to Los Angeles. If I would have showed you 10, 15 years ago, before you took this next, direction in your life, what you would be doing today, what would you have said?
Well, the plan was very simple. It was, we grew up and going to ULA and to YU and to Karen B'Yavna, that obviously learning is extremely important. Being a good family member is extremely important. Being part of the community is all. So that's exactly what I was planning on doing. I was planning on being a dentist in Los Angeles with a few of my uncles, also run different practices, learning in the mornings, working in the afternoons, helping out with the different schools, and raising a very nice family around the rest of my other family in Los Angeles. If you were to even talk about to me while I was dating, that was the story.
Wow. I have to love that answer. I'm thinking just now, for what I know you personally, is a lot of the work that you do with students that are currently in Yeshiva and Seminary, and you have a whole amazing, I wouldn't say mission or system that's going on there, but just like what Nitzavim Fellows does is truly amazing. And I want you to touch on that a little bit before we get into the topic of what happens after Yeshiva and Seminary. So give me and the listeners a little bit of a bigger insight to what Nitzavim Fellows is. What are you doing with students in Yeshiva and Seminary? And we'll go from there.
So the Nitzavim Fellowship is a very simple but amazing mission. Is that these kids that have gone through day school and then yeshiva high school, and then they come to Israel. Now they're going to secular campus. So when they're there, that they shouldn't just prioritize classes, fun, friends, but if they also take their ultimate value, which is a proud Jew, and proud of Israel, and now they go onto college campus, they can make an impact in a way that no Jewish organization can. Because let's just be frank with each other. If a Jewish student that is not involved in anything is walking down the quad and sees one of the Jewish professionals there trying to tell people, are you Jewish? Come in, come to this class, come to that class. Most of them make a beeline the opposite direction. And therefore, the way to potentially increase Jewish engagement and Israel engagement on college campuses is through students, because they're going to be in classes with them. They're going to be in clubs. So if all of these students in Israel that have been here for a year go onto college campus with intentionality to befriend and bring other people in, can you imagine what Israel's going to look like in a couple of years? Can you imagine the percentage of Jews that are involved in Jewish life? It's going to go up tremendously. And that's the movement we're trying to create in Nitzavim is, yes, we're teaching them about how to combat anti-Semitism and how to do all these different things, come up with projects for when they get onto college campus. But at the essence of everything that we're doing is to create a movement of these kids to go onto campus and to continue their commitment for Israel and Judaism by getting everybody else involved. And that will keep them stronger, and that will also get so many more Jews involved for Israel and the Jewish people.
You got me sold. So where could I apply if I was in Yeshiva or Seminary? Where do people apply for Nitzavim if they want to get involved?
They go on our website. We actually have early admission starting right now. And we tell people apply as early as possible. We really are trying to get as many spots available. But this year we had 200 applicants for 100 spots. And I don't know if we're going to be able to go beyond that. We're expanding with Masa and other people as well. But our core fellowship is only 100 spots.
Baruch Hashem, you have a lot of people that want to be a part of this amazing thing. And obviously the topic of today's episode, a lot is revolving around secular college. And the question that I want to start off with you today is taking my unorthodox kid that goes through the system, as you said, for 12 years. They have all this Jewish education, and now they go through Yeshiva and Seminary, which is that very pivotal year in their life. And then after, they have to go to secular college. And we can be frank, there's a lot of things that go on a secular college campus that, are make it hard to either be religious or anti-Semitic or different things like that. And there are other alternatives, per se, in the Jewish world for Jewish universities and stuff. So I'm curious to hear your perspective, being someone that is very involved in Jewish life on campus, seeing what goes on. What is your thought? Should students be going to secular college after Yeshiva and Seminary?
It's a really, really good question, and it's a really hard question. Being a Jew on these college campuses is very complicated. It's complicated right now because of post-October 7th. You see firsthand that people really are in danger. We're in touch with all different types of students. Some of our students really feel that they are scared for their lives. Others don't really feel scared for their lives, but there are times that people don't want to go there. We're in touch with one of our students that were on our program and now in law school. NYU has allowed them to take all the classes online. He took 1.5 years online because he was scared to go to class. Now that obviously is an exaggerated case, exaggerated scenario. But there's no question that there are major concerns on college campus. Not only just in terms of threats for people's lives, which most people don't feel, but in terms of values that are going to be challenged. It's very, very hard. Now, imagine getting onto a college campus for somebody that 12 years of their life, day school, yeshiva, high school, then they come to Israel for the year, and now you're going to college campus. So number one, the schedule is just so different on a very base level. You're going to be taking classes, you're signing up for classes, you don't even realize, well, what happens? What am I going to be doing on Rosh Hashanah? What am I going to be doing on Yom Kippur? What am I going to be doing on Chol HaMoed? Meaning these are just things that you never ever thought about before, that you may not even consider until you get onto college campus, because it is so normal for people to go. So since it's so normal, the amount of students that I talk about that they didn't even think about this before they're signing up for classes. So they don't know if their class is on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, but let's say this year, if your class is on Wednesday and Rosh Hashanah, then Yom Kippur, then the first days of Sukkot and the last days of Sukkot end up on Wednesday, you're going to fail out of that class. And that's not something that people think about. Why? Because they never had to think about it until then. So that is something that is just a very practical issue that comes up that you never had to think about, and you don't have to think about it if you go to YU or if you stay in Israel. So that's number one. Number two is the professors. A lot of the professors, again, it's been exposed right now. A lot of the professors are anti-Semitic. And even if they're not anti-Semitic, they don't like Israel. No, Israel, anti-Semitism, anti-Israel is the same thing. Again, another big question, but we've had so many of our students that couldn't get a letter of recommendation to study abroad in Israel from their professor. Now, those are classes that these students are potentially going to be in. Are they checking into this before they get into the class? So, because what could easily happen is, let's say you want to go to medical school, or you want to go to dental school, or you want to go to law school, or wherever you want to go. And now your GPA is really going to make a huge difference. And you get into one of these classes, and all of a sudden you find out that the teacher, your English lit teacher, really doesn't like Israel so much. And now your grade can be affected by that. And it's crazy. Obviously, you can't prove it, and you're going to get in arguments with your professor, but it happens on a yearly basis to people. It's not uncommon. And those are just a few technical issues that arise. And obviously, the biggest issue that will come up is that generally being on college campus is not the same values as what the Torah is teaching, right? The Torah is teaching that Torah is first, second, Torah and mitzvos are the most important. And on college campus, it's a big machlokas, depending on which college campus you go to. If you're going to University of Arizona, which is the number one party school in the world, so then, yeah, the value there is party, 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 and then maybe academics is fifth down the line. And then Judaism for the average Jew on these college campus. I was once speaking to a Hillel professional, and I said, "Why can't you get more people through the door?" And he told me this. Ari Israel, the head of Hillel at Maryland, he told me, "Well, just think about it. Like, for the average non-Orthodox Jew, what priority is it if you'd go?" So number one is probably partying. Number two is probably school. Number three is probably, friends or whatever it is. So he said, for the person that cares about Jewish life, so their fourth priority is Judaism. For most people that don't care about Jewish life, then you add clubs, and then you add this, and then you add that. So when a Jewish student is going into an environment that we all know that the Rambam teaches us that every single person is affected by their environment. So they're going into this environment where everyone that they're going to meet cares about everything else before Judaism. So how does that affect you? So that's for sure one of the biggest challenges. How do you keep your values straight when everybody else around you, including the professors, including the institution, and including the friends that you're going to make, their value system is going to be very, very different. And therefore, you have to be extremely strong and extremely committed to be able to continue to grow as a Jew. And that's part of what we're trying to teach in the Nitzavim Fellowship, that if you take on a responsibility, that you're going onto campus with a sense of responsibility to be the one that not only grows yourself, but is bringing in hundreds of other Jews and hundreds of other people to care about Israel, then that can keep you very strong and can build you. Now, obviously, the last thing that we didn't touch on, and probably the biggest thing, is in terms of the value between boys and girls when you get onto college campus. It's very different than what the Torah teaches, and on college campus that probably is the unspoken number one value. So how do you, as somebody that came to Israel and is going there, how do you relate to that? It's very, very challenging.
For sure. And obviously there's a lot more to talk about. That was very thorough of an answer, and I really appreciate that one. I think you hit a lot of good points. I kind of want to get into you personally, right? So you work with all these students that are going to all these secular college campuses, and you see, as you mentioned, all these different things that they have to face, right? So as being the person in the position that you are, do you have an agenda with the students that you're working with? Is it, I want to try to get them to go away from secular college? Like, is it hard sometimes to let's say, if you don't necessarily value going to secular college as much, or do you have an agenda? That's more the question.
Yeah, 100%. I think every single person in the world has an agenda for something it's part of life. We have an agenda. And the agenda here that I try to stay as real as I can is to ultimately to Judaism, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and doing what is best for the Jewish people. Therefore, I really do believe that the Nitzavim Fellowship is something that is helping Klal Yisrael, helping Israel, that these students can make an absolute difference when they're going on to these college campuses, no question about it. Now, in terms of the individual, every single individual has to be responsible for their decision that they're making. And this is really what we're trying to teach in Nitzavim, is the concept of responsibility, of realizing that whatever it is that you're going to do, realize that there are consequences, and realize that you have to step up to the plate for wherever you're going to be, wherever you're going to do, and whatever you're going to be doing. And therefore, in terms of, we're very upfront with students about the challenges that they're going to face. We're very upfront with them about all the organizations that exist on those college campuses. And we even delve into university by university, because every single university is an olam bifnei atzmo. In terms of, if somebody wants to commit that they're going to be davening 3 times a day. So that's really nice for you to make that commitment, but it also depends on what university you're going to. At Penn, you could do that. At Rutgers, you can do that. At Maryland, you can do that. It's really hard. At Michigan, it's not happening at a place like Dartmouth, for sure. And even at those places, it's like, you take a look, and how many people are at the minyanim, are at Shacharis, are at Mincha and Ma'ariv. Again, you have to look university by university, and you have to be honest with yourself. That's the most important thing, that when people are making decisions, they should sit with themselves, they should sit with their parents, they should sit with whoever else that they're looking for as their mentors, and just understand, what are the facts on the ground? What are my values? Based on my values and the facts on the ground, what should I be doing next year? It's the same thing that people do when they're trying to decide what profession they want to do. So if they're going to do that for their profession, and they're going to do that for dating and everything else, when you're making a decision of what college you're going to go to, is the first decision should not be is, where do I want to party? The first decision should be is, how is it going to help me academically? How is it going to help me with my Judaism? How is it going to help me with Israel? How is it going to help me with familially? They go through all that process. That's what we think is most important, is helping people realize that process. And then once they've committed on doing A, B, C, and D, is realizing nothing really is a commitment. You could always change. But if you are going to go and you're going to secular campus, wherever it's going to be, is ultimately at that point in time, you can make a difference in a way that there is not one other Jew in the entire world that can do that in the way that you can. And therefore, be excited about that, accept that responsibility, and jump forward and do that, the Malcolm Shein ish, that nobody else will do.
I actually want to touch on something you just said, is that in the decision process of figuring out where to go for secular college, one of the main important pieces is discussing with your parents. And oftentimes what I've seen in many situations with students that are in Israel is that they decide where they're going for college in high school. They decide on X secular college, and then they come to the year in Israel. And whether they want to stay Shana Bet or they want to transfer out of a secular college, but then their parents are completely not in favor of that. So do you have any advice for somebody that might be in that situation of their parents are really the main reason why they're going to secular college when they don't want to go?
It's a great and very important question. Number one is that I would love to offer my services of any parent that wants to speak to me and understand what is going on college campuses. Is I would love to be of assistance and try to get them to understand what is happening there, and is it a good idea, is it a bad idea for their student? Because what is important to note, and in Nitzavim, we believe that people that are going there can do unbelievable jobs when they're there. But the likelihood of somebody going to YU or someone staying in Israel and coming home back to their house with an extreme case of a non-Jewish girlfriend is not going to happen at those other places. And I will tell you, it has happened more than you think at some of the other places. And therefore, you just have to think about what is the value system, and going to a place like a Dartmouth or a Swarthmore or a Syracuse or a place like that there isn't any Jewish infrastructure should not be the starting place for anybody that is coming to Israel to a yeshiva or a seminary. There are other places that have infrastructures, and even those places, they would have to really think about that. And so, for a parent, yes, they should talk to the student, and a child should talk as well. I think that what is most important is honesty and transparency. And therefore, if you want to come to whatever conclusion that you feel is best for you, your child, have that with the child. Have it with one of the teachers in the yeshiva and the seminary, and just say what you believe and why you believe it, and have an open and honest discussion, and move from there. And then you could do it. There is nothing that ever goes wrong from having meaningful discussions. You may disagree, but at the end of the day, everybody will learn from it and then prepare better for what comes next.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's actually, you hit on a really good point. And I feel like, a lot of students, when they're in Israel going potentially through that struggle, it's very hard to have an open conversation and be very transparent and honest with your parents. And I think that was just really great advice.
And I would say it also leads to something uncomfortable, is that there should never be a situation where a child is in Israel and then they're pitted parent against teacher, whether it's the yeshiva or it's a seminary. It's just not fair for that child. And therefore, the yeshivas and seminaries, as well as the child, as well as the parents, should all be responsible and try to get that conversation happening between all three of them, because ultimately, they all care most about this kid. And therefore, to have a conversation without one of those parties involved, especially without the parents involved, is not necessarily helpful for the long term of this individual.
For sure. Couldn't agree more. I want to highlight something that you said before. Is you gave an example just as, somebody goes to secular college after Israel and, they end up with a non-Jewish girlfriend. But I'm sure you have, as we've talked about this before, many different stories of things that you've seen of like, wow, like not that this sums up secular college if somebody goes, but like these are the types of things that can happen. Do you have any potential stories you could share?
There are unbelievable stories. There are things that come up. We could sit here from today till many weeks from now going through a bunch of these stories. And I'll tell you three stories from one of the schools that I went to, Maryland. Amazing infrastructure. I spent Shabbos there multiple times. The first time I spent Shabbos there, I was a little skeptical what it's going to be like. Again, I went to YU and came to Israel, so I never spent time on these colleges before. And going to all different colleges, I went to Maryland for Shabbos. Get to the minyan Erev Shabbos at Mincha. Kabbalah Shabbos, there must have been 350 to 400 people there. It was amazing. Some people singing, some people dancing, some people talking like any good young Israel, any good shul that you'll get. It was exactly like that. And it was really an unbelievable experience to see. Then came the meal. We went to the meal, and it was the winter. And again, there was 300 to 500 people. They couldn't fit them. They're building a new Hillel in Maryland because they can't house all that people. And it was unbelievable. Kiddush. Then I was shocked because, again, there's a winter, so it was early Shabbos, and about 50 minutes to an hour later was benching, meaning not a really long meal, and they barely had a minyan for benching. So everybody left by, let's say it was 7 o'clock. And where were they going? It could have been the year. This was 6 years ago. It definitely could have got better, but that was very, very eye-opening that on a Friday night, you would hope, I was excited, and it was my fault I wasn't giving a shiur. If I was giving a shiur, maybe all 300 people would have stayed. But no, it was something that was fairly eye-opening. Another thing is that as I was walking home, just that same Shabbos from the Hillel to where I was staying, I was walking and I bumped into two people. They were not Jewish, but both of them fell on the floor. They fell on the floor and they were like shaking. And I started screaming at the top of my lungs, like, ambulance, ambulance, ambulance. And three people right next to me started laughing at me. And they're like, what are you doing? I was like, what do you mean this guy's on the floor? Like, he's shaking. And like, no, he's just drunk. And I was in shock because, like, you see that, and I just assumed something was really wrong. And here everybody else is laughing, like, no, he's fine. He's just about to throw up, and he's drunk, and this is what happens all the time. So it was just a complete, like, different world that I entered. And then also just in Maryland, I want to say something very beautiful, that we had students last year on the Nitzavim program that went to Bar Ilan and Mivaseret and other places, and they're now at Maryland. And they started this program called Terrapin Tish, where ultimately they throw a tish on Thursday nights, not every week, about every other week or so. And their mission is that they go find other Jews that are not involved in anything else, and they bring them in and have cholent, and then they sing songs. And then after getting them involved, coming for a number of times, they then bring them to the Hillel and to the Chabad. And now you're talking about over 100 Jews that were never, ever involved. But because these boys, Izzy, Adam, Rafi, these boys went on with an intentionality, that means that every time they're walking into class, every time they're walking into any club that they're part of, they are now on a mission to find other people, to get them involved. And they're also role models at this point in time. They are making a profound impact on Maryland in a way that nobody else is, and probably nobody else has until now. And that's something that they learned last year on Nitzavim, and it's actually the project that they built, because every single group has to build a project. They built that project in Israel, and now are actualizing it and changing lives day in, day out there.
Wow, that's a great answer. And I honestly love those stories, and I'm sure, if we had unlimited storage on my phone, we would probably sit here for the next few hours. I want to think about specifics in terms of, I've heard this many times before, where students in Israel, they know they're going to secular college after Yeshiva and Seminary, and they say, I'm going because I'm going to be the exception. I'm going to be the person that goes. I'm going to stay religious, daven 3 times a day, learn whatever their definition of, their level of religiosity is. What's your thought on that? Can that be done? Can you be that exception?
Everybody can be the exception, but it's called the exception for a reason. And therefore, again, what the most important thing is that a person has to look at themselves, look at the reason that they are going to campus, where they are going, what are the resources available, have they spoken to people that have been the exceptions beforehand, are they taking the same classes, are they in the same dorm, do they plan on setting up their schedule the same way, are they being honest with themselves? For example, if somebody is not a morning person, but now they schedule that they are not going to start classes till 11 o'clock because they plan on learning from 9 to 11, that's really, really nice. But who else is doing that? And you are not a morning person, and you're coming up with this plan while you're in Israel, and your rabbis are sitting and telling you this. Like, it's probably not realistic. No, I've spoken at a lot of the different yeshivas and seminaries, and before they go to college campuses, and you go around and you ask people, what's the biggest challenge that you're thinking you're going to face, and how are you going to overcome it? And people generally are not honest enough with themselves. Like, the answers that they're giving is that I'm hoping I'm going to learn 3 starim a day. Like, there is no chance, unless you set up your schedule in a crazy way, that you're not going to graduate in 4 years from Penn, that you're going to be able to learn for 2 hours in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, and 2 hours at nighttime. You're either going to fail out of your classes, or you're not going to get up. It just doesn't work. So you have to be extremely realistic and understand, what do you expect yourself to do? Who else has done this? How are you going to do it? And have a realistic plan in order for you to be the exception. If you do that, plus you add onto your life's mission that you're going there not just to keep yourself chazak, because keeping yourself chazak is extremely hard, but you put yourself into a position that you are a mashpia. You're going to help make a difference. And the reason that now you're going to whatever college you're going to is because this is best for me academically, professionally, familially, religiously, if you have all those. And now you couple on top of that I'm not just going to get that stuff done, but I am going on with a mission to help change Jewish lives and the future of Israel, then it's much, much more likely that you can be the exception.
For sure. And I've actually, I agree with you on that point, because I've seen it done firsthand with friends of mine that have gone to secular college with this certain mission and focus, and they've thrived, Baruch Hashem. I want to touch on something that we said way back in the beginning of the podcast, which is students that come to the area in Israel. They go through 12 years around of raised in Jewish system, and a lot of money gets poured into that, right, from parents. And there's a lot of potential things that can happen to a student that goes to secular college. And as we discussed throughout this podcast, like there's a lot of risks, obviously. My question is to you, is it worth it? Meaning, for what you've seen that these, could potentially happen after all these years of going through Jewish education to all that can be changed like that by going to secular college, is it worth it?
It's a really, really good question. In terms of this answer is, I do think that there's a challenge with the educational system in general. And I think people are trying to address it. Number one is, if there are students and your high school is a high school that many students go to secular college from those high schools, and you're a yeshiva or seminary, you're an institution that you have people that are going to colleges afterwards, have to do a better job at preparing these kids for getting there. Meaning that there are a large amount of our institutions right now that are set up as, in Israel, if you go to secular college, it's a bust and let's give up on those people. And I have many stories like that as well. And therefore, what is important is to figure out, what is the goals of our yeshiva? What is the goal of our high school? If the goal of our high school, and sometimes this is a big issue in the high schools, is that you have a balance that is not balanced out properly between the college guidance counselor and the hanhala of the Judaic studies. The secular studies, they want everybody to go to Harvard, to Yale, to Columbia, and then you have the hanhala that is pushing that they should not be going and they should be going to YU. That creates an infrastructure that's very confusing for parents, very confusing for students. And the biggest challenge, I would say, is that in those situations, and then also when you get to Israel as well, is it success only if they go to YU or they stay in Israel? Is it success if they go to other places as well? It's a big, big question. And therefore, there is a gap on not enough preparation for when they get onto these college campuses, is how to be the exceptions or how to thrive, because it's an avoided topic. A lot of that is it's intentional. It's an avoided topic because it's hard to be committed to your values on those college campuses. But if you are a school, if you are a parent, if you are an institution that part of your value system is that you are going to be sending to NYU, to Columbia, to this place, to that place, then have to make sure that there is a better preparation and educational infrastructure for people to get there. Because if there is not, then it's going to be really challenging. I'll give you one example. Just this past weekend, we had a trip for Nitzavim, and there were students that came over to me that are going to Princeton, Yale, and I don't remember the third school, but Princeton and Yale. And they were asking, is that there's a flaw in our system because you have so many Jews that went to private Jewish school, maybe not Orthodox, but when they get onto college campus, all of a sudden they're on the board of SJP fighting for for the rights of Gaza. And they said the reason it happens is because we're not in our Jewish educational system. We're not preparing students with facts, because as soon as they get onto Columbia or to Princeton or to Harvard, and the professor is saying facts about what is happening in Gaza, and they don't know how to respond, then all of a sudden people are being turned off. And I asked a really simple question to these boys or girls that are very smart and are going to a great yeshiva or seminary here, and I said, who's to say that what your professor is saying is fact? It's biased. Every single person in the world has a bias. So they're telling you something, and you're telling me that you're not prepared because you haven't heard these facts before, and your professor is telling you a fact. This is a problem with our educational system, is that if a student that went to Jewish elementary school, Jewish high school, is in Israel for yeshiva and seminary and believes that a professor at Columbia or Harvard is going to say a fact that they never heard, and you're not going to be able to put it into perspective of how the Torah views it, and maybe not everything people says is fact, then that's going to lead to major problems. And therefore, I think what's most important is any place that is promoting people to be going to the institutions and they're going, we need to do a better job at preparing these students when they get there.
So I think that's all great. And there's a lot of good points you said over there. I want to touch on specifically, obviously you have education before Israel. The system could be a little bit better and different schools prioritize different things. For somebody that comes to the year in Israel that was never prepared, and now in 8 months or 10 months, whatever, they're going to be stepping foot on a secular college campus and they're in Yeshiva or Seminary. And the whole goal of this year is like to focus on your learning and your Torah, but then you also have something which is a whole beast in itself in secular college. What's the proper balance to like prepare yourself for what's to come, and how much effort should somebody be putting in their year in Israel?
It's such an important question. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do in the Nitzavim Fellowship, is that what we tell students is sign up for the Nitzavim Fellowship, is that if you're going to secular college campus, is that we're going to prepare you. We're going to discuss all of these challenging ideas, talk about responsibility, build projects. But what is also so important is that we're telling people that your year in Israel, your gap year program, your Yeshiva and Seminary is priority number 1, 2, and 3. And therefore, what the Nitzavim Fellowship is that we're working around, which is an impossible task, working around all of the Yeshiva and Seminary schedules. Our program, our fellowship is on Fridays. Our Shabbatons are happening when no other program is doing anything that's going on. Our end of year showcase, we coordinate with the yeshivas and seminaries ahead of time. So number one, I think that just by showing students that we are an organization, that it is so important, it's imperative to prepare to go to college campus, to know what the facts are, to know how to stand up for anti-Semitism, also to have this responsibility, build projects so that you can be the strongest that you can be next year. But by us also showing by example that their year in Israel is yeshiva, seminary, grow Jewishly. This is the one time that you can do, is hopefully something that the students understand also as part of the Nitzavim Fellowship, is that when they leave, their priorities also have to be straight, is that themselves grow Jewishly, care about Israel is also the number one priority. And that's really what we do on the Nitzavim Fellowship. We tell students, you're coming to Israel, your focus is the yeshiva and seminary. If you sign up for the Nitzavim, then we'll take care of everything else. You will know how to be prepared for when you leave.
It's a great answer, and I gotta say, kol hakavod for being able to figure out the schedules of all these schools, because I'm sure it's a headache in itself. I want to touch on schools specifically, right? You said before you have a lot of stories, and feel free to share if you want, of students go to specific yeshivas and seminaries, and obviously there are some that are more pro-secular college, some less. Should schools and rebbeim and teachers have a say on the matter of if or should a student be going to secular college? Like if a student comes to the door, some teachers obviously have an agenda. Let me get this kid away from secular college and go somewhere else. Should they have a say on the matter?
I think it's so important for everybody in whatever they're doing to be passionate about. So if somebody is in high school and they're passionate about getting people to go to, they're the college guidance counselor, that they should be pushing the students as hard as they can to, can you get into Harvard? Can you get into Yale? Can you get into Columbia? Is it going to be good for you professionally? 100%. And a parent has a responsibility for their child to make the decision of what institutions they want to send their child to. So therefore, if a priority for them is that they want them to get into Harvard and Columbia and Yale and for that to be their path, so then there are certain high schools for them to send to. And the same thing is when you're coming to Israel, is there are a lot of different institutions that stand for all different things. There are plenty of options, and the Israel Gap Year does an amazing job at helping to give the students that understanding, the parents as well. But parents should research and understand what they're getting, where they're sending their child. And you never, ever want a teacher at one of the institutions that you're sending your child to, or that you as a student are choosing to go to hold back on that passion. So if they care about something, they should be talking about it. They should be speaking to the student about it the same way that we're talking to the students about Nitzavim, that when they get up on campus, don't be scared. Get up and do things. And then your job as a student, your job as a parent is to digest that information, to think about it critically and strategically, and then figure out your next step in life.
Wow. I think that was a great answer. And I want to just get a little more in depth on everything you're saying, obviously, as a whole, because this whole podcast has been, linear in terms of our topics. In terms of advice, for somebody, let's say, that's listening to this, hopefully, many people that are on secular college campuses are listening to this, and I have only a few more questions to ask you, but this is just advice for anybody that's in a campus that whether they ended up there because their parents wanted them there, they went because themselves, and now they're like, okay, all this is going on around me. What do I do? What would your advice be to any of those students?
So it's twofold. Is number one is that you, before you could do anything else, is you need to figure out how you can be strong. Sit down. I tell everybody before they leave Israel to make sure that they're writing what they believe their priorities should be next year when they get onto college campus. What do you want to be doing? And be realistic. Is it talking about going to minyan 3 times a day? Is it about keeping kosher? Again, everybody comes from a different household. They've gone to they've been brought up differently in different yeshivas and seminaries, different gap year programs. Figure out at the end of the year when you have had this immersive, unbelievable Jewish experience, before you step foot onto college campus, what is it that you want to be doing? Then in the summer, look at it again and be honest with yourself. Because once you get onto a peer pressured campus or any infrastructure, anything could happen. We all have problems getting up in the morning sometimes. And if you wait to make a decision, what time I'm going to get up, you're not going to get up at the right time. You have to decide that ahead of time. So the same thing, when you're going to college campus, you have to figure out beforehand how you're going to be strong. Once you're there, it's also good to have check-ins. The Jewish calendar allows us to do that so beautifully. Whether it's Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, to think about what you want to accomplish this coming year. Again, we're starting with the personal level. Whether it's just Shabbos, sitting down on Shabbos when you're going to have your phones off and you're not going to be focused on Friday night. Take 5 minutes and think about how did the week go and how do I want the next week to be better. If you have individual check-ins, which is based on the Jewish calendar, you're going to be in a very good place. Beyond your personal, you need to stay strong personally. That's community, that's davening, that's meals, etc. That's learning. Beyond that is if you don't have a mission that you are going to be getting other people involved on college campuses, then you're missing a huge opportunity. You're in this place. You're at whatever college you're going to be at. We are an Or LaGoyim. So number one, just understanding that you walking around, smiling at people with a kippah on your head, saying hi to somebody, if they happen to be Jew, you have no idea how that's going to affect the rest of their life. You don't know how it's going to affect when all of a sudden they pick up the paper the next day and they read something about Israel. And you said to them, hey, nice to meet you. Where are you from at the Freshman Fest? And they say, oh, I'm from here. And they ask you, where are you from? And they're like, hey, I'm Yechiel. I was in Israel last year. And you smiled at them. And that's the only part of the conversation. And you said, I'm Yechiel. I was in Israel last year. And the next day they pick up the paper and they see Israel's done horrible things. And then they remember, 1 second, Yechiel, he was so nice to me yesterday. He smiled and he was there for the year. There must be something wrong with this, right? That on a very base level, just being an Or LaGoyim and walking around as a proud Jew can do some tremendous things. But then you take it one step further, is that if you actively will go out and try to do something different, try to bring other people that are in your clubs with you to Shabbos dinner. Talk to people. Go out of your comfort zone and talk to people, because you talking to people can really make a huge difference. If you have that as part of your weekly mission, A, you'll see results right away. And B, you'll feel like $1 million, and you should feel like $1 million because you are doing something that no other Jew in the entire world can.
I love that answer, and I kind of want to pivot from a different angle, is that high chance somebody might be listening to this that is in secular college that went to Yeshiva and Seminary even a few years ago. And let's say they didn't get involved in Nitzavim. Let's say they didn't go in with the proper structure of what they wanted to in order to keep all that of what they learned in Israel and obviously those 12 years of schooling before. If somebody's listening to this and they're a few years into secular college and they're like, man, like, I wish like I started off that strong, or like, I'm just not there. And like, I wish I could get that back from Israel, but like that just thought is so faint. I'm like, there's no chance I could do it. What would your advice be to those people?
2 things. We believe in tshuva, meaning the concept that anybody could take a step back and reassess anything at any point in time. I will say that one of the other things that we are actually working on, that we launched a program, is called Rimon. Rimon is basically for people that are maybe came to Israel, maybe didn't, but to take a semester abroad in Israel, meaning anybody that is on college campus can have a semester abroad. So it could be amazing for them to come back to Israel, to Hebrew University, to Yerushalayim, get credits and have a pause and be back in Yerushalayim getting credits. Like that in and of itself is one of the ideas that we're moving forward, and it's really, really exciting. to come back for a semester abroad. Even if you did a gap year, you could come back and get credits. It's one way to take a pause, and it's an unbelievable opportunity. But in addition to that, if you are sitting over Shabbos like we discussed, and you realize, I could do better, it's very simple. Go look around for that one or two exception person that you're looking up at, and go over and talk to them and say, hey, I love what you're doing, the way that you're able to make sure to keep kosher, that you're making sure that not to go to parties, that you're making sure to come to davening, that you're going over and speaking to a lot of other people and getting them involved. How do you do it? Would it be okay if I check in with you like once a week and I'm going to try doing this? A chavrusa is always something that helps out. Speaking to somebody, but not just writing down your own values, but actually articulating that and finding this mentor. It will be a game changer.
I think that was actually great advice. And I have two closing questions for you. And these are, after hearing for the past almost hour of just everything that you've done, I get a greater appreciation for what you've been able to do. And I want to kind of channel this question towards yourself, is that you've worked with hundreds and if not thousands of students and have seen so much. What has this past 10 years been like for you? Like, what gives you the feeling to keep doing this every single day, and talk to me about what this has been like for you?
I'm extremely, extremely passionate about Israel and the Jewish people. The assimilation numbers are very, very sad, especially post October 7th, to see how many Jews don't even care about Israel anymore and are fighting against Israel. What keeps me going every single day is that knowing the amount of people that are being changed because of all the work that we're doing, the amount of money that's being donated to Israel, the amount of people that are changing their mind and their perspective about Israel, the amount of people that are doing mitzvos all over the place. And we have no idea how many people these are. What we're trying to do is create, in addition to our study abroad, where we get students to come here and they are actively changing. But when somebody comes on Nitzavim and they now leave and they smile at somebody on campus, we have no idea the ripple effects that makes. But every once in a while, we'll hear a random story from either one of our students or from somebody that they bump into. Like a girl at University of Chicago, that she was hanging up a mezuzah and she saw people peeking and looking like, what are you doing? And instead of, she told me, she said, because I was on Nitzavim last year, instead of me just hanging it up and closing my door, I turned around and I asked, hey, nice to meet you. Who are you? It turned out they were Jewish. And now she hung up a mezuzah with them. And now her and her 6 friends start coming to Hillel. Like, those are stories that just by touching one student here now touches those 6 students. And those 6 students go back to their families. And maybe they care tremendously about Israel, maybe not. Maybe they'll come to Israel, maybe not. But realizing that every single interaction that any Jew has with another Jew can make a difference for thousands and thousands of people. And I've seen that firsthand. That's what keeps me going. What keeps me going is that one person you interact with can change the lives of thousands and thousands of people.
That was an amazing answer, and also just a really good point. My last question to you, and obviously I asked you about just advice questions, a few minutes ago, is what is your message in a bottle? Meaning, anybody that's listening to this at whatever stage they are in their life, if you had one message to say to anybody, what would that be?
HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us in this world for, yes, to make sure to take care of our families, to make sure to be educated, to make sure to grow as an individual. And those are all extremely, extremely important. But to realize that each and every one of us can really impact so many people around us if we just try, even minimally. Saying hi to people, inviting people for Shabbos. Everybody lives in a different orbit. Some people are on college campus, some people are in YU, some people are in the workforce, some people are in this club in Maryland and that club in Maryland, and we're all going to interact with all different people. We're all going to have our interactions with all different people are going to be extremely different. And you never know who and what you could say to make an impact that will change a person and their generations for life. And to realize that that's what an Or LaGoyim means. It doesn't just mean, say brachos and say hi, but it means accepting responsibility that every single one of our actions that we're doing, people are watching. And not only people are watching, is that we could also go out of our way and help other people watch what we're doing. And therefore, if we all, especially people that are in the modern Orthodox world that grew up going to ULA, going to YU, going to Maryland, going to Michigan, going to Binghamton, if we'll get up and our number one value system is Torah, Israel, and we use that as a guiding light to interact with every single one around us, we will leave the most amazing impact for Israel and for the Jewish people in a way that nobody else can. And we should be excited about that and accept the challenge. I know that you're a basketball guy, I am too. Accept the challenge and the responsibility, because ultimately, through these types of interactions, this is how Mashiach is going to come.
That was awesome. And I'm looking at the clock right now. It's been basically an hour, and that felt like, a very short conversation. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I just want to thank you so much for opening your amazing office for Nitzavim here in Yerushalayim. And obviously, I can't forget, shout out to Yair Isaacs, your amazing brother who listens to all of our episodes. And hopefully we'll play basketball sometime when you come visit in Rimon Page Shemesh.
The best, yes.
But just thank you again so much. And looking forward to seeing you
Avi,
again.
for everything that you're doing. And Mirza Hashem, this will continue another time.
Amen.
Thank you guys so much for watching this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I took a lot of chizuk from Rabbi Isaacs, and hopefully you did as well. And if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it to one of your fellow constituents, because at the end of the day, we want to inspire as many Jews as possible with the work that we are doing. If you have any questions about anything we spoke about in this podcast, check the show notes below. And I look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks for next episode. We'll see you soon. All the best.